Hey, how's it going, everybody? I wanted to talk about music production, and I was thinking about um, basically, I was thinking about keyboards and workstations slash synthesizers, sequencers versus DAWs, and so tonight's subject, I'm just going to interaction on the DAWs and workstations compared to working on a workstation like the Core Cronus or the the Montage or working on the Rolling Phantom or whatever your choice. This is probably not going to be for unless unless people that work in the DAW. There's a lot of people that uses Pro Tools and Reaper and Logic Pro and all that. So um I want to get some. I was going to get some interaction on that because I noticed that they're trying to make the new boards more and more intuitive as far as workstations and sequencing and all that. But do you think, um, you know, for me, I don't think the um, the workstation sequencers are nowhere near to the level like a DAW. Like I'm talking Pro Tools or um and so forth. Oh, okay. I got a couple of people that tuned in already. Okay, how's it going, Bor Shamir? How's it going? And Maddie Two Hats, welcome. He says, "Hey, Mark, I just watched a video on the Outron." Oh, okay. Yeah, I did those a while back. Um, yeah, I did those a while back about those 73s. I think that when it comes to clones, the Need 1073 is the most sought after preamp out there as far as a preamp. And of course, if you know about the Need 1073s, they originally how outboard gear actually started was they were taking bits and pieces of consoles and just like they would take a Neve console and just make a piece of gear just out of the preamp section of a console, or make an EQ out of the console. They would build this stuff, and then it became a normal thing. And the reason why they would do that is if you had a person that had an MCI console, so naturally the MCI console is going to come with MCI preamps and EQs. So what these guys, there are a lot of these inquisitive guys would do is say, well, we'll chop up a Neve console and make it 1073. We'll take the 1073 preamp out of that console and build a rack module for it. Or we'll take the preamp out of it and build, and so forth. And that's how outboard gear was basically born. And then, they would take other pieces of gear like the Pultec, which stands for Pulse Technologies, and use it for pieces of gear that was normally used for like military broadcasting and stuff like that, or like the Fairchild 670 Fairchild. Now that was actually used for radio broadcasting compression. So they said, well, now instead of using it in the radio, why don't we try it in the studio? That's how all that was born. But yes, do I still use them? Yes, I do. Um, so yeah, they're still sitting in the rack here. I still use them. I use them. But I was talking about music production and gear. The reason why I was thinking about that because I have a Rolling Phantom, and I'm about to do the EX upgrade for my Rolling Phantom. But I also have some older Rollins. I have a Rolling Phantom S. I got some Rolling G's, but I also have the Core Cronus. I got a Triton over here and some other boards, and they all can, do music production. They all can, like, Triton can sample and things like that. And then of course I've been using DAWs for years. The Cakewalk, I've been using Cakewalk as one of my go-tos. Studio One, I mess around with Reason Studio. Logic Pro, all of them really. Um, the reason I'm talking about that because I was watching all my tutorials, 'cause I never get a chance to watch the tutorials on every single keyboard that I got. It's just I never so I'm sitting down and watching the tutorials, and these keyboards actually do a lot. And they're basically standalone workstations like my Chronos. You can do full face production, you can hook a mic on it. It's got 48, you can do 48-volt phantom power, you can do audio in it. But can it do with what a DAW can do? Because the power what a DAW can do, I'm not seeing any of these boards that can match what like Pro Tools can do. Let me see. No, I do have a Juno X and some vintage Korgs and the like, but we sequence and vintage MPC, which is another, MPC was geared toward beat making and sampling and splicing up samples, but now they're pretty much a standalone another DAW. Boris says I also have the Phantom XR rack. I do too. That like I just use it for the sounds too. I have the XR rack. So I don't even use the sounds off my Phantom S pretty much anymore because I use the sounds from the XR. But I also have the Phantom G. But I also have the new Phantom. The reason I'm talking about the music production and stuff like that because I noticed that there's if you're a keyboardist, if you're big into keyboards, you've probably seen Yamaha Montage. Like I have a Motif. I don't have a Montage yet. I do have the Motif, and I love all the sounds in that Motif. That the sounds are off the chain, but everyone knows that the Motif, when it comes to like the performance sets or layering and all that, the Motif is limited because it came out in 2010. Unlike the Chronos, which you can layer up to 16 sounds on the Chronos, but the Chronos also has 9 sound engines, versus the Motif only had 2. But the Montage, which is the new version of the Motif, then now they got the Montage M, just like with the Roland G. Then they came out the new Phantom, and now there's the Phantom EX. And then there's the of course I already said the Korg. So yeah, Yamaha, Roland, and those are the 3. There are a lot of Nord users. My only down thing with Nord keyboards is their price. Because I was talking to a really good friend of mine about Nords, and he has a Nord. He has the first stage Nord. He also has the Nord Wave and a couple of Nords. And I think that they sound amazing. But the new, like for example, the new Nord Stage 4 is about, if you want the new stage 4 Nord, it's $56.99, right? And I was sitting there looking at it like, well, the Nords, they can layer on the piano side, you can layer 2, or the synth side you can layer 2, or the organ you can layer 2. And I'm sitting there like, well, that's limited compared to what I can do in my Roland or my Chronos. Plus, the Nords, they don't have any production. There's no drums in it. There's no drum kits. You can't do any full-fledged productions. You can't sample. You can't. There's a lot of stuff the Nords can't do. That the Yamaha and the Roland and the Phantoms can do. So I know some people say, well, no, we just simply, for playing the Nord live, whether they're playing it in church or they're playing it for the sounds. But they have so many awesome VST instruments for organs and pianos and all that, that I'm like, I can't justify for what all the Montage can do. And you can get a Montage, like a Montage M7 for $39.99, brand new, right? For what all it can do. And what the Nord can do, the Nord can't do half of what the Montage can do as far as functions. I can't justify spending an extra $1,800 for limited options because it's a Nord. I can't. Welcome, Joseph. I'm just talking music production and stuff like that and keyboards because I'm a keyboardist. Welcome, DL. I'm good. It's a Sunday. Just talking music production. And then Borsman said, right, Nords are fresh, however, price me. Yeah, they're just for what if you think about it, the functionality on Nords to other keyboards. If you look at what it can do and you look at what a chord can do, like they got the Chronos 3, they brought the Chronos back. Look what the Chronos can do as far as everything that it can do. Look what the Montage can do. Look what the Roland Phantom, even the Kurzweil, the K2700, look what they can do. And then look what the Nord can do as far as functions. Not just the sounds. Because if you're going to spend that kind of money, all those other boards can sample. All those other boards can layer 16 sounds. They have their workstations. You can, if you're on the fly and you got your board, you can't sit there and, man, I got this song idea. Let me lay down some beats and some drums to get my, you can't do that on a Nord because Nords don't have drums on it. I can do that on the Montage. I can do that on the Roland. I can do that on the Korg. I can do that on the Kurzweil. Can't do that on the Nord. So to spend that to almost $6,000 and not be able to have all that functionality, I don't just that. That's just me. There's some Nord users here that love Nords, but I can't justify it. If I'm going to spend that kind of money, I want to be able to I might want to be on the fly. I might not always have access to my Pro Tools or Logic Pro or to my DAW. I might want to do it right there in the board and lay down an idea right there. I could be gigging and I don't have to worry about trying to open up my DAW and connect to an audio interface and then I can go right there in the board. Like, for example, one of the great things about the Roland Phantom G, 128 tracks with 24 of them being audio. That's incredible. Let me see. I got some more comments coming in. Okay. Welcome, Olga Pix and was that Don Gordy? Yeah, welcome. Welcome. Just talking music production today. Everything is well. Let me see what Joseph said. There's an argument to be made through what the Nord does. It does that piece better. Okay, I'm listening. Because now for sounds, how Nord sound, they sound great. They sound amazing. The organs on it, the pianos, the synths, they're awesome sounding. I've listened to Nords, but I'm talking about dollar for function. And then let's see what Don says. It's true that most new synths and workstation keyboards are high price, are out of high price. Zach. Well, if you are content with working your DAW, like I work in my DAW the most. I don't really work on the workstations that most. I'd rather, because DAWs do 10 times more. Plus DAW, with all the plugins and everything that you can add in. But when it comes to Nords, function for function of what a Yamaha Montage can do, what a Roland Phantom can do, what a Kurzweil K2700 can do, what a Korg Kronos can do, and so forth. Nords can't do any of that. Matter of fact, even the Nord States can't even do what Roland just put out, the V stage. It can't even do that. There's functions in the V stage, and the V stage is $39.99. The Nords is $56. You can't. To me, it's like I don't want to spend $6,000 because it's a Nord. That makes no sense to me. That's like when I was making my video about the SSL Big 6 console. I'm not going to spend $3,000 on a 12-channel mixer when I can get a Midas M32 and get 32 channels. And the amount of capability that it can be done in a Midas M32 or whatever, Behringer X32 or the Personas Live, it just for the same price, make sense to me. Let me see. So Dio says, I want the Yamaha to release their VST sound to the public that doesn't have the mod. I've been waiting on that too. There are people that, like, I know gospel musicians put out VSTs of, famous keyboards like Yamahas and all that, but that's their, they do it. And there's a few other people that do it, but I don't know about Yamaha putting out, like, it was genius that Core came out with the Core collection, where you could buy the Core Triton VST, the Core Triton Extreme VST, the Core Wave Station VST, the Core MS-20 VST, the Core Prophecy. I got the Core collection, and out of all them, I got like 13 of their top vintage and classic synths for like $149. And on top of that, when you buy that Core collection, you get all the expansion sounds. It's got more sounds in my Triton VST plugin than I got on my actual Triton Studio right here. I'm sitting there now, I'm like, man, my Triton Studio don't even have those extra sounds. I'm like, now I'm looking for the expansion cards for it, because I wish my Triton Studio had those sounds. And then let's see, Bornschman said the Juno X is getting sold this week. I may be back out. I take a loss to the Iberheim. Yeah, it's kind of like I think the Juno and the Jupiter for rolling, for that, especially the classic 80s. A lot of people want that classic 80s synth sound. That seems to be a hot commodity going on right now. Is those analog and those classic sounds. Just like a lot of people are seeking the DX sounds again. DX they were the inventor of the FM sound, frequency modulation sound, that those classic EP DX sounds that we've heard on a million records from the 80s. So let me see, got some more comments. Deals asked me, have I found any VST synths that sound as good as the workstations? I at the Korg, because I do have Analog Lab 5, I do have Synth Anthology, but as far as VSTs, the Core collection seemed to be the best value that I've seen as far as VSTs. VST of instruments are modeled after their synths. It's the Core collection. So that is what I've seen. Even though I think the Analog Lab 5, there's also the if you got IK Multimedias, they got their Sample Tank and Centronic. I got the Sample Tank, and that was I bought the IK Multimedia Studio Pro. That took forever to load. That's another one. Just a ridiculous amount of options. And then, of course, I forgot about my hard drive on this computer. I also have the VIP, which has like expand and a lot of those sounds. So it's I don't know. I'm probably sitting on 50,000 if you include all my keyboards and all these VSTs, over probably 50,000. I won't even use 90% of those sounds. It's just too much. So let me see. Got some more stuff coming in. As Dio's asked me, is the Midas board good for recording and mixing? Would you buy Yamaha 01, the 01R, the 02R for recording? I have an 01R over here. I would not. It is dated. The preamps in it are not that great on 01R, and I have it sitting right there. If I was going to get a Yamaha digital board, I would get the TF. They've improved the the TF32 or whatever, or even the Allen and Heath, the new one, that like the QU, or even the Personas Live, or the Behringer X32, or the Midas M32, one of those newer boards. Those old Yamaha boards, it's just dated. The digital conversion, the ADD converters are not as good as the modern digital boards today. That would be my recommendation. You would do better spending your money on a Behringer X32 than one of those old Yamahas. Now, if you get the Yamaha TF, then you're doing great. Because one, they connect with the USB. They work with your DAW. So now you can also use it as a DAW controller. But also you're going to come with some better premium preamps in it, better sounding EQs, and so forth. Digital boards today, I would say, within the last 8 to 9 years or newer, from like 2017 and up, I think you'll be fine with those digital boards. Let me see what else. But that Yamaha 01, I think it came out in 2000. Still works, but it's just the sound quality of it is not that great. But I was asking about the Midas board. Yeah, definitely the Midas M32, because that's the upgrade to the Behringer. Better motorized faders, just overall it's an upgrade. The Midas preamps that comes in it, you do great with a Midas with the M32, for sure. If you're looking at a digital board. Let me see. Dio's asking me how would the core collection sounds if you quartered the VSTs back into the. Let me tell you, the sounds of the Tritons, the core collection, like the Triton, the Triton Extreme, the Wave Station, those sounds are verbatim, because I got a Wave Station rack. And I also got the Triton here. I don't have the Triton Extreme, but I do have the Triton and the Triton LE, and I also have the Core Trinity sitting right here. But let me tell you, the sounds, even in my Triton, are still usable. If you think about the Triton, if you're familiar with the Core Triton sound, think of Mariah Carey's she came out, what was that? I think it was Mariah Carey's album, MC equals square, or I gotta look at that album. Whatever that album was, that was a Triton. All of Nelly's big hits. It's getting hot in here. A lot of Jay-Z's big hits, a lot of Alicia Keys' big hits, a lot of Missy Elliott's big hits. Because they were using Triton heavy. They were using the Triton heavy. DL, you got to stop erasing your messages. You got to stop. You got to stop doing that. I don't get a chance. You got to stop doing that. Retracting your comments. So yeah, but let me see. Are the older Soundcraft consoles preamps? Yeah. Most Soundcraft keyboards, especially the sound, if you can get your hands on like a Soundcraft Sapphire, a lot of people like the Soundcraft Ghost. There's the a lot of the Soundcraft to me sound as good as the Allen and Heath that I got here. So you can't go wrong if you get your hands on the Soundcraft, like a Soundcraft Ghost or whatever. They sound good. They really do. Born Schmidt says the Neptunes. Yeah, Neptunes and Timberland. So the Triton sound, I still play it. And that board still got, I mean, you think about music today, especially, music isn't hard. Music is like, it ain't like, the music being made today has like all these thick, lush, rich sounds like they used to do in the 80s. But But that you can make modern hits on the Triton now. So definitely. I saw it. I was at the Guitar Center and I saw a 88 key Triton Studio for $600, $599. And I like, I already have a Triton. I got the 76 key one. So it was like, well, I don't need a 88 because I already got a 76 one. Plus, I got too many keyboards in this house altogether. But even though we're talking the Chord Cronus, the Nautilus, the Chord Cronus, the Chord Chrome, or newer boards, but if you're in a budget, let's say your budget was around $300 to $600, you can run across a Triton or even a Triton rack for that, and you could probably make mega hits on it, even today. And the Triton, like the keyboard, like I got, not only does it have the CD burner in it, I can also sample on it. So you can sample. You can do a lot of stuff with that Triton. But anyhow, moving on. Welcome, Maine, and welcome. Dia said that's just me. Okay, yeah, like I said, because sometimes when you erase some of those, I don't get a chance to read all your comments, so I don't get a chance to elaborate on what you wrote. But anyhow, it's all good. Born Schmidt said Midas preamps. Yeah, on the Midas, yeah, if you get the Midas digital, there's the older Midas analog consoles too. Midas was like one of the go-to for live sound, is the Midas consoles. So you won't go wrong if you've ever been to any major concert. You'll be amazed when they were using analog consoles before the Digicos and the Allen Heath D-Live and digital consoles like that. Most of those consoles were either Allen and Heath or a Midas console for the most part. So welcome, Andre, and welcome, Chris. Like I said, I'm just talking music production, keyboards and things like that. So I want to Born Shamir. Oh, let me see. Go back. Are you talking about the Yamaha DX? Yeah. When I was talking about keyboards, when I was talking about the DX, like the DX7, the DX9, the DX21, the DX5, the DX1, those 80 classic synth boards. If you listen to all the classic 80s song, I don't like what's that song by Kim Wilde? It's a remake of the Supremes. You just keep me hanging on. That song. Yeah, my don't you, babe? Yeah, my life, why don't you, babe? Ooh. Those synth sounds are Yamaha. That's Yamaha. Or if you went and listened to a lot of Depeche Mode, what's that song by Level 42? It's something about you, right? That's the Yamaha DX7 sound. Now, if you want to get the Michael Jackson sound, Quincy and a lot of those guys, they use some of those analog boards, but they definitely used Roland with the Linn drum. So a lot of those drum sounds, those drum beats are like the Linn drum. And then a lot of those, like the Thriller, dun, 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 those are synth sounds layered with an actual real horn section. But those are Roland Jupiter and Roland Juno sounds from the 80s. But the DX7 was probably, I don't know, probably a million records was the DX7, especially the DX version 2. Really, really popular. But if you compare that sound to, if you have a modern Yamaha board, like a Montage or even a Motif, even the first generation Motif, those boards have improved big time, as far as the sound quality. Even the SYs that came out in the 89, 90, the SY77, the SY99, before they went to the EX5, and then finally, the Motifs came out in When did the Motif come out? 99, 2000, maybe 2001 was the first Motif. I know the first Phantom came out in like 99, 2000, the Roland Phantom. But the keyboard that was the game changer for all keyboards was the Chord Trinity. It came out in 95. And Sonic couldn't even keep up anymore. And Sonic just faded away. I got some Sonic boards. My ADT album that I did with the group of different tastes, most of those sounds were my Sonic SQ1. And then of course I got a TS12 and a MR61. And I also got a KT88 in the other room. But yeah, the Sonic boards were the late 80s, 90s, especially the ASR10 sampler. It was the ASR10 was the ultimate sampling keyboard in 1990. But anyhow, so let's see. Born says my Soundcraft GB has Midas preamps. And it sounds okay. Yeah, Midas preamp, because I didn't know that because Soundcraft has their own preamps. So okay. Oh yeah, Andre said I missed the racks version of my keyboard. Yep. I have like I said, I have the Roland XR rack, and I also have the Wave Station rack, but I also got the Proteus 1 and 2. So that was the as far as rack, but I wish I did have more rack keyboards instead of the actual keyboards, because it would save me some space. So Adia, you're asking what's so special about the Trinity? Okay, when the Trinity came out in 95, I remember when this board came out. It was the first board that was touchscreen. And not only because it was the first board that was touchscreen, the sounds that Chord put in that Trinity was just mind-blowing compared to for Roland's flagship board in 95 was the Roland XP50. I have the XP80, but Roland, and then of course Sonic came out with their MR60, the 61. They came out with that version. And I'm trying to think, for Yamaha was the EX5, the EX7. But the Trinity, no other board with that touchscreen could do what that Trinity could do. And on top of that, the sounds in it, that was the game changer. Every other keyboard manufacturer had to step up their game, because I know Kurzweil had just recently put out their K2500, and they're working on the K2600, but no one would, that's what Chord set the standard. And then when everyone else started trying, Roland came out with their Phantom. Yamaha came out with the first Motif. That's when Chord said we're going to keep the game. We're going to keep the game. We're going to be the king. They came out with the Triton, and they came out the Triton in 99, and then came out the Triton Studio in 2001, and everyone was trying to keep up. And every time other boards would keep up or try to come up with a board that can compete with the Chord just kept. And then, of course, the other boards, with the Roland XR comes out. So finally, Chord releases the Oasis. But the problem with the Oasis is Chord, they made it so expensive, no one could compete anymore. Or Chord, it outpriced itself. So finally, when they came out with the Cronus, because now by this time, Motif, when they came out with the XF series, a lot of people had shifted from the Chords onto Yamahas and the Rolands. You got the Roland G came out in 2008. The XF comes out in 2010. The Cronus comes out in 2011. But by that time, the sounds and the sound qualities and what you can do on the Yamaha Motif XF, There was already the XS, and of course the Motif ES, but the XF was the game changer as far as the sounds and the sampling and everything else. So that's how us keyboarders are. The one thing that you can blow a keyboard player off, we don't really get so much into the functions as we do the sounds, especially when you start getting a lot of those thick layered sounds, those pad sounds, those synth lead sounds, the drum kits that come in it. So it just really depends on. So now it's really, you got it's more personal preference now when it comes to these keyboards. Some people are just diehard Nord users. Other people are just going to be like, no, I think the Yamaha Montages is the best boards ever. Some people are going to say, no, the Korgs are the best boards ever. Some people are going to say the Roland, the Phantom is the king. So it really depends, because all of them sound great. You can't go wrong with any of those boards for production and sound. Especially if you're going to use those sounds and still use your DAW. And there's just, once again, it's like with DAWs, it's all personal preference. But that's what's special about the Trinity. It was the game changer. It was the first board that can do what it can do, and sounded as good as it did. That's what it was. But remember, it is 95. So it is 30. It came out 30 years ago. But, naturally, if you were in the market for a more modern board, a Trinity wouldn't be looked at today. Most people are going to pick up a Cronus or Nautilus or something like that. They're not going to look at a Trinity. Some people will. But now when I look at the limitations of what the Trinity compared with the Triton, if I was going to look for a vintage 90s, an older board like that, I would pick up a Triton over a Trinity. That's just me. If I was going to pick an older board in the Korg family. Born to me says Psycho Kato from a Korg. Oh, okay. So he was behind the M1. Yeah, the M1, it came out in 1988. I was not a big Korg M1 fan. I thought their pianos and EP sounds sounded great. I'm telling my age when, I'm alive and well, very live and well when these boards come out. Put it like this, I'm telling my age. When the Korg came out in 88, that's the year I graduated high school. So that'll tell you how old I am. So I remember when that board came out, because like I said, the craze before the M1, everyone was on the Yamaha DX7s. That's all you saw. Every music video, when you see a band and they're playing a keyboard, you saw a Korg, you see a Yamaha DX7. But when Korg came out with that M1, those started popping up all over the place. So I went down to the music center, because Guitar Centers was not a big thing then. There was no such thing as Sweetwater. There was, back in those days, there were actually specialty music stores like Music Makers and places like that. So you had to go to music stores like that. So I went to go to those type of places and listen to it. And I always thought the horns, the sax sounds, the strings, the guitar sounded kind of cheesy. And then, of course, and Sonic was big. You had the EPS, you had the Sonic. They had the Sonic. I wasn't big on the Mirage. And Sonic had the VFX board. But somehow the pad, the thickness, the fullness of Ensoniq sounds is what drove me toward the Ensoniq boards. So I lean more to the Ensoniqs. And I thought the Ensoniqs, so that's what I became my main gigging board, was the SQ1. So I still have my SQ1 to this day. It still works. Changing the battery in it is a pain in the butt, but I still use it. I still play it. from time to time. But when I compare my Sonic compared to my MR61 or my TS12, the TS12 sounds better. But that's to be expected. So Deal saying, what sounds impress you now? Never heard Kurzweil sound. Okay. And now speaking of Kurzweil, I have a Kurzweil K25 and I got the Kurzweil PC3 LA7. What I like, I'll kind of give you what I like about each brand between the Sonic, the Kurzweil, the Korg, the Roland, and the Yamaha. If I was to only have one board that pretty much has every rounded sound that's going to sound good all together today, if I was going to pick one board that's just going to be just blown out amazing, it's good. Definitely going to be a toss up between the Roland Phantom, the Yamaha Montage, or the Korg Kronos. Those three. As far as the sounds, they just but I think the Yamaha to me has some of the best grand or actual regular piano sounds out of the three. I think Roland is dominating the Rhodes EP sounds is Roland. But it's a toss-up because the Montage the Yamaha has some really excellent EP sounds, the full vibrant, especially when you layer like a nice EP sound layered on top of a nice pad sound. It's just, but where I think Korg shines is all those new age synth electronic, they just dominate when it comes to those. If you're looking for pad sounds or you're looking for horns, lead sounds, Korg is just, when I'm sitting there playing my Kronos, I'm still blown away with that Kronos. That Kronos to me, as far as those synth sounds, is just, I would choose my Korg when it comes to those sounds. Now, if I want the fat layer piano sounds, I'm looking at my Yamaha. And if I want those EP and Roland, those Fender Rhodes, those Wurlitzer sounds, those sounds like that, I'm looking at the Roland Phantom. So, but all of them sound good. They all have their place. But now Kurzweil is also another company. George Duke was a big Kurzweil user. I would say playing my Kurzweil, the sounds that come from that, especially a lot of the sounds that come from that Kurzweil, because the Kurzweil K2000 was like their flagship board when it came out in 1990. But I would say you can't go wrong with, even if you like the Kurzweil, the PC3, the PC4, the K2700, even if you got that board, the sounds in that, the pianos, the EP sounds, the strings, the guitar sounds, they are stellar. So that's just my thoughts between those boards. But it's all about really what you're looking for. You probably can, if you had the library, like the sample tank library, like I got, you probably would be, the sounds just come from that, or the core collection. You can use that, the VS, because they're pretty much the same sample model sounds that come in the boards, but instead of being on the hard drive on the boards and the hard drive on your computer, on your Mac or PC. They all are usable for production. But like I said, what I've noticed, what I've been noticing, and a lot of these manufacturers have been putting out, they're putting out a lot of the classic analog keyboard sounds again. That's what I've noticed. Even Behringer's coming out with a remake of the, I think it's the what version? I think it's their version of the Jupiter, and the Moog and the Oberheim keyboards. They put out like the Deep Mind and those type of keyboards. So many people are wanting those type of classic analog sounds again. So I think, of course, there was the Oberheim OB. Well, Behringer came out with the UBXA, which is the Behringer version of the Oberheim. If you're looking for those classic analog 80s sounds, 70s and 80s sounds, some people are looking for that. So it just depends. And the reason why I'm saying that, because whether you want to work in your DAW, you want to work in your whatever DAW you're working in, Pro Tools, Logic, Cakewalk, Studio One, whatever. I think a lot of you can really get creative if you have a good library of stuff to make you to work with, to come up with ideas. Because what's great about not being an artist under a contract, working with some producer where the record label was forcing you to sound like everyone else, you're not limited. I would say you don't have to create your stuff to make it sound like everyone else anymore. I'd say with your library of sounds and ideas, be inventive. That's what I say. You have the free reign, everyone has the free reign to be inventive and creative, and just use those sounds and just see what you come up with. So, so the deal says a lot of people say that DAWs and VSTs are thin and sound weak. What is my approach to making sounds thick or punchy? In other words, how do you make those sound thick? Here, this may be controversial for some people. To make it sound thicker and warmer is take all your sounds that, whether you work in whatever DAW, have a good ADD converter, like I got the envelope, and I run it through an actual analog console, and I actually use outboard gear. And that analog, this outboard gear in this console is going to add some weight to it. That's how. Now, don't get wrong. Also, you have to listen to certain keyboards. For example, if I listen to the grand piano on my Kurzweil, and I listen to the grand piano on my Roland, and I listen to the grand piano on my Yamaha, you have to also listen to that patch and say, well, some people don't have all those boards. So some people don't have an option to, but I have that option. Or let's say I'm using, like, for example, I think the Analog Lab 5, the grand pianos in the Analog Lab 5, or the piano, just the piano from the Analog Lab 5, the pianos sound rich and thick enough to use those grand pianos. And then, of course, when I run it through a channel, and I might run it through some like the VLA compressors or whatever, that's going to give it a nice, full, thick sound. If that makes sense. So that's how I make it. The more Shimmer said they sound good. Like I said, half the time, keyboards or instruments, they only sound as good as the player. So if you have a person, you can have a person can own a Yamaha Montage, and one person can be really good and another person can be mediocre. But the person that's mediocre is not going to make that Yamaha Montage sound good. It's going to sound mediocre because they're mediocre. It's like if you anything else, it's like you could take a guitar player, and a guitar player can take a cheap instrument and make it sound amazing because it's the skills, the experience. Now, a good guitar player wouldn't probably play a cheap guitar. They're going to play a better good sounding guitar, better strings. They're going to have a setup. They're going to have the intonation set up, and so forth. They're going to have better sounding string. Or if you're a bass player, there are a lot of times if you have a $300 bass or whatever, you're going to buy better pickups, better bridge, better strings. A lot of times that'll improve. One thing you really can't change is like if it's a rosewood neck, or what type of wood is being used for the body. But there's a lot of improvements you can do to improve the sound of that bass, including the bass cabinet. Like I have a couple of bass cabinets, but my favorite one is my Harkey. It's the exact same bass cabinet and bass head that Victor Wooten uses. It's an amazing sounding bass cabinet. I got it downstairs. So let me see where we got some other comments. Let me see. Born Smith said Core got converted over levels, but I don't remember what she was running with genre. Gravity. I'll dictate. Well, anyhow, just kind of reading the comments fast. Like I said, you got some people, there are gonna be some people that just don't like certain brands. There's nothing, there's people have what they like. I am not really biased. I think every brand has its advantage, and then every brand has its disadvantage. You use that brand for its advantage over its disadvantage. Let me see. You got other experience with Core, other experiences with Core besides Cronus. Yeah, like I said, I have the Trinity. I have the Triton. I play my Triton a lot because I'm always finding something on that board. I'm like, that's like this is one pad called Padalicious. I really like that patch, but it's got so many sounds, and then the drum kits in it. I can still use the drum kits in it now and make a full-fledged production with it. And then also I have a Korg 01W Pro. It's a big one. It's an 88 downstairs. It's got a lot of fat sounds in it too. It's just big. It weighs. It's like I call it Big Bertha. It's huge. So it's not, portable like my other boards. But yeah, other than the Cronus, but my Cronus is just, that board is off the chain. What it can do and how it sounds is off the chain. I love my Cronus. So let me see. And then I guess, and then let me see. Deal says, what budget outboard processor would you recommend if you want to make commercially competitive music? The best, believe it or not, when it comes, you say which EQ, compressor, limiter. I'm gonna tell you some really good outboard gear that's affordable, that sounds really good, and it's affordable. Is the Lindale Audio. I have a pair of the Pultec style EQ by Lindale. I have the Lindale. It's called the Lin 2A. It's their version of the LA 2A. I have the Lindale Lin 76s, which is basically their version of the LA the 1176. I think the 11s, and they're all affordable. $499, $699, $399. And then of course the Art Pro VLAs are really good compressors. That you'll probably see those in probably half of the commercial studios out there. Is the Art Pro VLAs. They're really that good of a compressor. So those are super affordable when it comes to some outboard gear. If you want to get some outboard gear that's affordable, that sounds, in other words, you're not going to hear night and day difference between a Lin 76 and an actual 1176. You're not. They're that close. So Let me see. What was it? Mark, they're trying to erase my mistakes for my. Oh, okay, gotcha. Welcome, Vigilante. Any tips for EQing vocals that are the same frequency as the main sound set? Yeah, here's the thing about EQ, and here's the thing. One thing about vocals, a good starting point, for example, you really got to be careful between 200 and 400 hertz boosting that. A lot of times, a lot of engineers like to attenuate that frequency, even though they want to add maybe a little 160, maybe no lower than maybe 180 hertz on the low end to give it just a little bit of bottom, but not going above 250 to boost that, because you don't want to start creating this low end. Like me, I put a high pass filter on vocals because I don't want the low end of the tone of their vocals to compete with low end tones, like from a uh bass guitar. Just like me, I put a high pass filter on keyboards because I don't need the low end of a keyboard patch like an EP competing with the bass guitar. And then you good frequency to kind of boost a little bit, 2 or 3 dBs, around 500-600 hertz. You got to be careful between a little over 1K. You got to be careful with that frequency. You don't want to boost too much in the 1K. Adds mid-range shrill that you kind of don't want. But you do want to kind of boost a little bit over 3K to add clarity to your vocals. You definitely want to try to boost a little bit of between 8K and a little bit, just to give it a little bit of high end. But you got to be careful between 5 and 7K. You really don't want to boost those frequencies on vocals because you start getting to simulants. So you know, a lot of times you got to start adding de-essers big time if you're boosting, because those de-essers, because those S's can really be annoying. That's why they use de-essers to reduce a lot of those annoying S. But that usually happens between 5 and 7K. So that's kind of like with vocals. Female vocals, especially on the low end, usually around 200, need to be boosted a little bit more than males, because females are naturally higher pitched than males. Males, you really want to be careful with male on the low end, because men, especially bass or baritone singers, the low end's already going to be present, but the high end part you got to boost a little bit more. So that's kind of my, if you for vocals, for EQ and vocals, if you want to but yeah, you want to get you don't want to make sure that if you listen to an instrument, guitar, keyboard, you want to make sure that they're not on the same frequency, because they're competing. Everything's trying to compete through the speakers. And you want to make sure that your keyboards, if your keyboard's pushing 500 hertz or whatever, your vocals and your guitar is at 500, something's going to get lost in the mix. So you got to make some adjustments. That's why you got to kind of look at your bandwidth and see where you're going to move out of the way, if that makes sense. There's some references, believe it or not. I keep EQ reference notes tape right here, because a lot of times when we're recording and we're mixing, I always have to stop myself and say, let me go back and go to my EQ and my compression reference charts to make sure I'm not in a rush and I'm trying to mix something and all of a sudden I've got these EQ problems or these compression problems. So I stop back and I look at my reference chart to say, okay, why do I want to boost this instrument or this whatever for whatever particular reason? So I keep you can Google those. You can Google and search EQ and compression settings for vocals, for drums, for bass, for strings, for instruments. You can Google that and see, it'll tell you why you should boost or why you should cut certain frequencies for these very reasons. And believe it or not, it works. And it works not only for recording, but it also works in live settings as well. If you ever get into doing live. The one thing about live, unlike recording, is live, there's no room for error. If you're the main sound engineer for running a Janet Jackson concert, if you got feedback and frequency issues and it just don't sound good, guess what? Somebody's getting fired because that sound company, that's $50,000 to $100,000. They ain't making those kind of $100,000 mistakes when it comes to freaking. That's why they get it right. You don't want to have walk around the stage and all of a sudden you start getting woo-wee and all these feedback. Can't have that. At least in recording, if something don't come out in a recording, you can always go back and all right, we got to recut that track again. That's the great thing about being in the studio. But studio can be, the only downside is the more time is money. Let's see, right, and that is where chord shines. It won't complete your lows that says mood has unlocked, but the MG, yeah, it's kind of like when I was saying earlier because I have all these boards between Kurzweil, Yamaha, Roland's, then Sonics, and so forth. I think Yamaha altogether has the most well-rounded sounds. Like if you got a Yamaha Montage, or even like me, I got the Motif, the Montage, but I don't think the Yamaha, when it comes to those, if you're into EDM music and you do a lot of electronic digital music and you want all those heavy, really bright synth pad, unique character sounds, Yamaha doesn't have that. Like Yamaha has really great grand piano sounds. They have really nice EP sounds. They got strings, have nice realistic horns, sax sounds. They got a lot of nice pad sounds and stuff like that, but Korg shines there. I think Roland has really nice grand pianos, but the Yamahas are just a tad bit. If you were trying to compete with grand piano sounds and you wanted something that's going to compete with the Nord grand piano sounds, your second best instrument choice is going to be like a Yamaha on the grand pianos. If you wanted something that's going to, on the EP sounds, Roland's got that on lock. Those EP, I've always, even with my XP80, Roland's, I've always had those EP and Rhodes and Wurlitzer sounds on lock. But Korg is those synth sounds. As far as organ, because I play an actual Hammond, I'm real biased when it comes to organs on Nords. Everyone loves the organ everyone loves the organ sounds from Nords. But because I play a real Hammond with a real Leslie cabinet, trust me, in my opinion, Nords are not touching a real Hammond with a real Leslie cabinet. It is not doing it. There ain't no organ on any keyboard touching an actual Hammond. That's the reason why all churches, if they can afford it, that's why every church is going to have a real Hammond with a real Leslie. It can't be beat. It's that Leslie, and I play mine. The only difference between a C3 and a B3 is the C3 is your feet is covered. On a B3, your feet is exposed. You can see when you're working the foot pedals. That's the only difference. It's the same tone generator, but I play it every Sunday because I'm a church musician. So when I've listened to other organs coming from the Korg, the Yamaha, the Nords, nothing's touching that Hammond. Let me see. So and mostly all that consumer level Korg. Yes, like I said, some people may not want a Korg simply because now I think the Korg grand piano sounds good, but it is a little thin sounding compared to the Yamaha. But I think Korg's got everything else covered. The EPs, the sounds, the Rhodes sounds, they got that covered. You probably, if you wanted a really good, nice sounding grand piano, you probably can get away with just using your Analog Lab 5. Like me, a lot of people have the like me, I have the I got 3 Arturio Key Labs. And they come with, when you buy an Arturio Key Lab, you get Analog Lab 5. I've listened to those grand pianos, and those are some realistic grand pianos. So if I'm going to do a production using the grand piano, I'm very content playing that. That's just me. Oh yeah, see, Tron says Yamaha has really good clavinet. Yeah, I like the clavinets. And the clavinet sounds are really good. This is the reason why Stevie Wonder uses the Yamaha, because Stevie Wonder's a big clavinet user. So if you probably seen quite a bit of Yamahas on stage. Stevie's playing that corner, and he's also playing the Yamaha. But the clavinets are also good in the chord. This is the reason why Herbie Hancock plays the chords. He also plays clavinets. But I think when it comes to clavinet sounds and Wurlitzer sounds like that, all 3 of those brands got that on lock. Korg, Yamaha, Roland, they all got that on lock when it comes to clavinets. Clavinet really boils down to the player, especially how good they're doing with their syncopation. They're good with their articulation and their syncopation of being able to really make a clavinet sound. That's going to sound good no matter what brand. No matter what brand you get. But if you're looking for that solid grand piano now, one of the biggest people that I've seen that people really like the most when it comes to grand pianos, I've seen people like the Roland RD2000. I've listened to the RT2000, and the grand piano and the RD2000, is, yeah, it's stellar. Like I said, the only thing for me when it comes to Nords, my only problem with Nords is just they're too expensive, especially for what you're getting. Now, if you were getting that Nord sound, the keyboard action, their sound quality, but you also got a sampler, you can do music production, you just got drum sounds, you can sample, you can do all this stuff like you can with the other brands. Then I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see why they're a little bit more expensive. But because it can't do half of the other boards, I'm like, you can't. That makes no sense to me. To spend $6,000 on a stage 4 when I can get high quality sounds from a Montage or my Roland Phantom. That's just me. NMC, yep, and Bushwood, yep, be playing them the core the Cronus. Like I said, I got the Cronus X. I don't have the Cronus 2. They got the new Cronus 3. I have the Cronus X. And for what it can do, and it, if you never get a chance, and of course there is Jordan Rudess. He's a big Korg user. Trust me, that Cronus is off the chain. It really is. It's just, I saw one day I'm gonna have to do a demonstration with these boards if I ever get a chance to. And I'll just never get a chance to. Yeah, Bornship said Herbie that. Yeah, Herbie, he's a big, he's a Korg endorser. So, like I said, I have the luxury of having all these boards. Not everyone has the luxury of having all the, not everyone has all the boards like I got. But they all have their pros and cons. The only con to me for example, the Korg is the boot up time. It's just way too slow. That's my only complaint. Let me see what else. I'm not really big on the sequencer portion of Roland. I think Roland, the best sequencer setup that Roland came out with was it came in the G. I think that had the best sequencer setup um, for the Rolands. But I can sequence it. I can get into the Korg and sequence and do it for production like that in the Kronos. And the same thing with the like my motif. I can sequence and like that. But I think the Kronos has more editing power or things that you can do with editing in the Kronos. But because I work in Studio One, Cakewalk, Logic, and all these different DAWs, the sequencers are not that important to me on those boards as functionality and sound. So now I talked so much about keyboards and music production. What I wanted to talk about right quick is on the music production in your DAW. For those that are still, what DAW do you like? Y'all can kind of write that in the chats. Do you like are you a Studio One user? Are you a Logic Pro user? Are you a Pro Tools user? Are you a Cakewalk user? What DAW? Because I'm familiar with all of them. And the reason why I'm saying that is the reason why I'm saying that is because workflow is what's important to people. Some people workflow is that's what's important to them, and some people, like for some people, there's some people that like for example, FL Studio. They find it seamless to work in FL Studio. Me, I don't find it seamless. I can work easier in Cakewalk or Mixcraft or Harrison Mixbus. For FL Studio, you got to know FL Studio to work in. I can even work in Ableton Live. You got to know FL Studio to work it, but like anything else, when you know something, it's easy. Oh, let me see. CC Function, Yamamoto T sequence is it is. I can, like I said, with the sequencer, I can look at the because like me on my motif, if I go to motif, you got pattern, you got song. And all I got to do is go to pattern, whatever, and then I hit pattern, and then I hit the number one, that's track one. I can go to category, find my scroll sound. I'm gonna put drums. I'm gonna go and get this new age hip hop kit, put that on track one, and now I'm ready to go. And I can hit my record part, it's ready to go, and now I can sequence, whatever the case. I can chain those patterns together, whatever, and I can go, category two or hit number two. Now I'm on track two. I can like that. So that's when you're working on your keyboard. Now, if you're working in a DAW, you just gotta understand how those DAWs work. Let me see. So, okay, mainstays like Reaper. Yeah, Reaper. I'm not really big on Reaper's original DAW layout. So I went to the Reaper themes and downloaded the theme that it looks like. Now I got my mixer console looking like a Neve console. So it's like it's an emulation of hitting these different buttons that make it look like you're working on a real console. And it also changes the track layout. So I just download the Reaper themes and just get different themes to change the look. That's what I love about Reaper. You can download themes and all of a sudden now your whole, if you know what you're doing, you can make your Reaper look like you want it to look if you're that intuitive. Let me see. Born I like cool. I like cool edit. Okay. Born Smith, I like cool. C-Funk said Bitwig. Okay. All right. And then of course he said Logic Pro. Yeah, Logic Pro. And then more said, I cut my teeth on Cakewalk in 94, 95. Cakewalk, you're talking about the old Cakewalk. like 3 and all that. Um, but Cakewalk, the new Cakewalk, when I started working in Cakewalk, it was Sonar Professional, and then it went to Cakewalk by BandLab, and now it's going back to Cakewalk Sonar. I got videos on why I like Cakewalk. So if you ever watched that video on why I like Cakewalk, I to me it's the pro channel in the new Cakewalk. There's not a single DAW that has that pro channel like Cakewalk. But everyone has their preference. Andrew says Nuendo and Reason. I was big on Nuendo because Nuendo was a Steinberg product. I messed with it a little bit, but I felt more toward the Cubase. So I became more of a Cubase user over the Nuendo, but Nuendo is still a good DAW. I like Reasons because what I like about Reason is because it's one of those DAWs that you can use just the software by itself and do everything you need to do in Reason. They got Reason 13 right now. Probably 14 is probably coming out soon, but they're on Reason 13. It's got all the instruments. It's got the sequencer. It's got the mixer that looks like an SSL console. So I just said whatever came to digital. I think digital because everyone started working with Logic Pro and because you got GarageBand and all that. But I think Digital Performer is just another DAW that they tried, but a lot of people just didn't gravitate to it. It's like with Harrison Mix Bus. Excellent DAW, but a lot of people just aren't gravitating toward Harrison Mix Bus enough. So everyone's, because if you look at it, what's the top DAWs that most people are using? Logic Pro for Mac users, Pro Tools, Ableton Live, FL Studio, Reason, Reaper. I'm trying to think the most popular. There are Cakewalk users like myself. Oh, it's Studio One. I would say those 7 are probably the most popular DAWs that I've seen out of all the DAWs out there. Is those 7. Reaper. I'm sorry, 8. Yeah. So Rewire has been discontinued. How do you feel about? Well, I never really used Rewire. Because like I said, working in Reason by itself, it was just enough for me just to do stuff in Reason. So I never really got, really messed with the Rewire. So that's how I look at it with that. It's just, let me see. So yeah, going back to popularity, with, like I said, with Logic Pro, Pro Tools, Studio One, Ableton Live, FL Studio, Reason, Reaper, are probably the most popular. Now there's other ones like Mixcraft, Harrison Mix Bus, and DAWs like that. And then some people even use some of the free ones like I'm trying to draw a blank on it. Like GarageBand or whatever the case. But those are the 7 are the most popular that I've seen. So, and did I say Studio One? I did. I think I did say Studio One. So, I think there was this big conversation that popped up about a couple of months ago. Y'all probably seen it about Pro Tools being the industry standard. And I think what I was trying to say was that, when we say the standard, sometimes that can be taken out of place of saying, well, Pro Tools is the best. And I don't think that is necessary. I don't think Pro Tools has ever been the best. I think it's just been the most widely used. Um, it's the most widely used because it was the most universal across all platforms, that everyone had adapted to. When it came to commercial studio, they needed a universal DAW that you can go from studio to studio to studio, load in the session, and they can just work. But I think what's happened now is, with everyone building home recording studios and using the DAW of their choice, that's why Pro Tools is no longer an industry standard. It's simply because no one needs to go to commercial studios as much anymore. Um, so that was the big point, because Pro Tools is a learning curve when it comes to DAWs. Pro Tools is it's a learning curve. There are DAWs that you can get in there and work really a lot faster. They may be a little bit more time consuming to set up, but once you get them set up, like Studio One and Cakewalk as an example, I find myself being able to. I can open up Studio One, and once I open up Studio One, because I can go over here on the right section, I can find what I need. I can find my instruments, my plugins, everything's to the right, and I can drag it in. And I'm ready to go. I can right click and create audio tracks, and then I can 24 audio tracks or 24 instrument tracks or whatever. I can right click, boom, they're there. I can F3 it, boom, my mixer comes up. I can drag in the plugins I want to use. And on top of that, Studio One is one of those programs that you got a lot of loops and samples and loops that you can use. I can drag in these. I can build a song like that. And I got hip to Studio One. This is probably back in 2013 when Teddy Riley was demonstrating it. I got sold on it when he demonstrated. I was like, look how fast that's what got me into Studio One. Cakewalk, simply because I've been a Cakewalk user since the 90s. So I know Cakewalk. I can bam, 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 bam. I can like that. The other DAWs, what I've learned about some of these other DAWs, I had to take a little bit more time to understand how they work. Now it's kind of like Ableton Live. Now I don't have the full version of Ableton. I have the Lite. So it's a limited program. But I can see how people like Ableton Live. Once you understand it, it's easy to get going. The same thing with Logic. I understand how Logic works now. I'm like, oh, now I see why people like Logic. Let me see. Mixcraft, same thing. Once I learned Mixcraft, I said, okay, I see why people like it. Definitely Reason, because I love the fact that in Reason Studio, I love that. Let me drag an instrument. Let me use this instrument here. I can drag it, go to the sequencer, hit F7, go to sequencer. I'm ready to start sequencing. And let me see. Okay, I can use the instruments within Reason, or it sees my VST instruments that I got on my hard drive, and I can use those instruments in Reason, or I can do audio, whatever the case. But it's all in one. And then what I like about it is going to the back view, and I can reroute the cables how I want, like I was doing, like I was on a real patch bay. I liked how you can do that in Reason. So let me see what other comments. Oh yeah, and Andre says Pro Tools had it's marketing more than anything. It became the universal. So, but now everyone, speaking of another DAW, Luna. I'm still up in the air with Luna because Luna still got bugs to me. But Luna is another DAW that's growing fast, and the more I work it, the more I'm starting to like Luna. So I'm just playing with it. And then of course Cubase. I forgot about Cubase. That's another hot DAW that I know that I like. I like everything about Cubase as well. Okay, so Zone says, Zone Recording Studio says, I think any dog will work. Just learn the back of your hand instead of jumping into different DAWs. And it's kind of like, um, yeah, it's kind of like if you understand, it's like whether I'm like I was talking about the keyboards. Once you understand how the keyboard, how it works, and what to do, I think that's what make people like stuff more when they understand how to work stuff. Me, it doesn't take me long to learn these DAWs because I understand the basics of DAWs. All I'm doing, because most DAWs have a lot of the same similar function. It's just that this function, instead of being here, is there. Or instead of doing this, is there. Instead of being an F3, you might have to shift, or you might have to, whatever the case, control or whatever, unless you're working on a Mac, and then of course you got command or whatever, whatever you're. But a lot of times, if you learn the short keys, all the short functions, and half the time, if you scroll the mouse over something, it'll pop up what it does and the short key to it. So like me, I can I can hit whatever example. If I'm in Cakewalk, all I gotta do is hit the R, and it's now this track starts recording if it's armed or whatever. I can right click and find my menus or whatever. But that's just me. That's the when it comes to DAW, that's the first thing I do is I study it and learn what it can do and what it can't do before I even start talking about it. So that's what I was just kind of talking about tonight with just music production. Unless y'all got questions about recording, or whatever. If you got any questions on that, but that's what I was just kind of talking about on music production and keyboards and all that. What I wanted to do was I really want to talk about on a music production my approach to what I do to record, and how do I set up to record. And I'll talk about that right quick. The first thing I do, let's say I'm going to record a track from my Triton. I always make sure that I'm recording in stereo, left and right. If you're recording from your keyboards, make sure you're recording to your in DAW. Make sure that you set up your track as a stereo track, especially for keyboards. They're not a mono instrument like a guitar or a sax or a trumpet. Keyboards are usually stereo instruments, and they usually have oscillating, and some of those pads are doing these things within the left and right speaker. And there are some layered sounds that come from your keyboards. Let's say your keyboards has 4 outputs. If possible, run those keyboards, the outputs, all 4 stereo out into a couple of tracks in your DAW. That's going to give that sound a full effect in your DAW. So that's one approach. Levels. Make sure your levels make sure you're not clipping. But I'll give your levels some headroom. When you're looking at, so when I'm looking at the meters, I'm making sure that I have maybe negative 18 to 20 dBs before it hits the 0 to give it some unit, but it's still got enough. I don't have any, I want to make sure the signal, there's no noise. I'm listening to make sure there's no grounding noise, or there's no buzzes or hums or unnecessary hiss. It's a nice full sound, but I also got some headroom. That's kind of like some of my approaches to setting up my tracks to record before I hit the record and record it. Because you don't want to constantly go back and say, oh man, I recorded that and I got all this noise, and then I got to go back and re-record that track. So that's, you want to kind of do that with everything, really. Vocals, guitars, setting up the outputs of your preamps for vocals or whatever. You want to make sure you're, the signals and stuff like that. So, but that's, if like I said, just that's kind of people got questions like that. Maybe some people don't have any questions on that, but it's all music production, kind of what we're talking about tonight. So, Zone Record says, I will sync my motif to Pro Tools. This is where I can vary the tip. Yeah, just with the USB. You can set it up as a DAW controller. You go to motif and you hit the DAW and all that and tell it, what DAW I'm using Pro Tools, and it'll, it's almost like that. Even though I do use a fader port for the most part, or I got my controls on my MIDI controllers here to control the DAW, and I can use the encoders and all that in the faders and all that to. But you can do that. You can actually control your DAW with the motif too, and I know the montage you can do that. EA, welcome EA. So you're asking me, can I elaborate more on having headroom on your recording input? Okay, basically, think about it. Since I don't have a DAW pulled up, I'm gonna use this fader as an example, right? If you ever seen a mixer, you'll see all the numbers. If you look at the top, there's a 0. That means the unity, right? Everything below that are negative numbers, right? All these negative numbers below that. So what you're doing is, most of the time, they want you to bring stuff to unity. Well, in recording, you want to kind of go just a little bit under that, just a little bit under that 0. That way, you still got plenty of signal. That means your noise floor is going to be really reduced. So that way, it gives you enough signal, but you're not going above the 0 into the red where you're going to clip. Because once you're going above if you're recording so hot, you got nothing to play with once you got it recorded. Because once you got it recorded and you want to start making adjustments, anything you start bringing above that, it's going to sound distorted. So you want to give yourself some playroom, some headroom, so that way I can bring the signal up a little bit more if need be. Because what you're trying to do is, when you're gain staging all that, what you're looking at is all your inputs on all your channels in your DAW or on a mixer, on your main output. The biggest key thing is looking at your main output to make sure that your meters aren't always like this. You're clipping your output, your master bus. You don't want to, because it's kind of like everything's too hot. So that's what I mean by headroom. You want to give yourself enough playroom so you don't have to worry about clipping your master bus, especially when you start adding compression and EQ plugins on top of that, because that's going to make the signal hotter on your if you are, let's say you got a kick drum on channel 1, and all of a sudden you add this 1176 compressor plugin to control the dynamics of your kick. But when you put that compressor, guess what? Your meters are going to get hotter. So now you got to back off the output of your compressor plugin, but at the same time, now it's going to sound like your kick drum is being squashed because you didn't give yourself enough headroom on the kick, if that makes sense. So that's what I mean by headroom. Let me see. Boomer says out. That's it. Let me see. Zone recording. I control my DAW on my console, or split it into 16 faders on the DAW and 8 more on analog. Yeah, that's what I do. Normally when I record and the output of my interface, all the outputs of my interface are on each individual channel. So it's coming through the console. And that's how I'm controlling the levels. So that way, when on my master bus, when I print. So now let's see. It says, how do you go about thickening a thin sounding instrument and input source point without distorting it in this similar? The first thing I try to do, if it's thin sounding, let's say I'm using an EP sound. Let's say there's an EP sound for the Sonic. But there's an EP sound that sounds thicker and better from the Kurzweil here. Excuse me. I'm going to choose that sound first before I use the thinner sounding sound to record. That's going to be the best way to fix that. But if you don't, you might have to double that thin sound. Let's say that's a string. And it's a mono channel string. Let's say you got it on channel 7. Well, you might have to duplicate that and make it channel 8. And then you can kind of stereo pair that same strings out just to give it the thickening that way, because you're doubling the sound. That might help. But it's hard to fix a thin sound. I'm trying to think any other way to fix it. Other than just choosing a better sounding sound. That's the best way I can say on thin. You got to be careful with trying to thicken it with EQ, because you might start adding frequencies that you don't want to add to try to thicken it. So that's what I would do if you're using a string or an instrument that sounds kind of thin. If you got a different source and it's the same sound that you want to use, try to find a sound that it's kind of like a grand piano from like my Roland XP. Then I'm using a grand piano from my Yamaha Motif, or I'm going to use the grand piano from the Motif. It just sounds fuller, already out the box. That, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, that would, if you've got no choice and that's the sound you need to use and it sounds thin, try to double it. Put it on 2 channels. See if that makes it sound a little bit fuller. And then Zoe says, I prefer using the automation on my console versus using the automation in Pro Tools. Works great. Well, unfortunately, I don't have automation on this Alan and Heath. So this is my automation. That's just the way it is. Believe it or not, sometimes in certain studios back in the day, before they start coming up with like Neve flying faders or the SSL automation faders and all that, they would have 4 or 5 engineers riding the faders. And they would put tape and have little marking points. So let's say the background vocals, I got them here in the change part or the bridge, and then the chorus part, I need to bring the background vocals. I'm going to ride the background vocals up a little bit more during the chorus. And then when it comes to back off during the second verse, sometimes you got to do that. But some things I need to automate because I have no choice to go into Cakewalk or Studio One or Pro Tools, whatever, and select the automation and let it do it that way. I don't try not to do that way because sometimes when you're listening and you're mixing, you're like, I pulled that too much, and now you gotta go back and fix it. But that's how I have to do it, because I don't have a console with automation. I don't have big bucks like to have a Neve VR with flying faders. I wish I did, but I don't have that kind of money. As Zone said, how I remember those days. Yeah, that was so you know what I'm talking about. If you go back, and that was the way you did automation. That's how they did it. They had 4 or 5 guys back there, and they would have the notes and all that. Okay, kick is bring the drums down on the change. Hey, not only that, but automation also includes panning. So, hey, bring the pan over here too. You have to do that too. You gotta keep up with all that, because the mix is important. Because the main engineer, there's no room for error when you're mixing it for the artist. So, let me see. Benjamin says, "What is thin sound to you?" Let's say, for example, a thin sounding let's say electric piano, right? Sometimes your ears, you have to have trained ears because I've been playing keyboards for so long and I'm so used to listening to thousands and thousands of sounds. I pretty much can tell when something sounds thick and full versus something sounds thin or it's usable, whatever. Um, a thin, it's almost like if even with a microphone, the best way I can describe thin would be like listening to someone on a $50 microphone and then listening to someone on $1,000 microphone, or really like a Newman or Telefunken or a microphone like that. Listen to someone on a cheap $50 preamp versus listening to someone on a $3,000 preamp with a $3,000 microphone or whatever. You can hear a person on a more expensive microphone to a better preamp sounds a whole lot fuller. So it's almost like listen to someone play acoustic guitar on a cheap $100 thin plastic sounding guitar, and then listen to someone playing on a really good sounding guitar with nice strings and a nice actual wood body. That's the best way I can describe it. So choosing a thin sound, if it sounds thin, it might not pull. You might have to overwork it in the mix for the thin EP sound to be heard. And before you know it, you're trying to overcompensate with EQ. And you're like, well, now I turned up the low end of the EQ, but now it's starting to sound low end muddy and it's competing with the bass because the keyboard just sounds thin. It's not pulling in the mix enough. It sounds thin. It's not full enough. And so that's probably the best way I describe with something sounding thin. It's kind of like when you get used to listening to vocals. It's like I can listen to a $200 Behringer cheap preamp, and then when I record through like my Avalon 737, the vocals are going to come out a whole lot more fuller through that Avalon, if that makes sense. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, they said it's perfect. Okay, appreciate it. So recording, believe it or not, and this is from some of the top engineers, and I used to study these guys like Al Schmidt. When I'm listening to recording engineers that even some of the engineers that I work with, like Chris Sutton and all these guys, right? The secret, like let's say I'm going to record a drum set, right? You can automatically tell because I play all these things. I play drums, I play bass, I play keys, I play guitar, I play bass, and all that. I can hear when the drums they're not tuned. I can tell if you got old skins on the drums, even the drum pedal. If they're using high quality Vic Firth sticks or whatever, or they're using thin sounding, instead of having Zildjian or pasty or even some nice cymbals or whatever, you're listening to this as they play. Because you're also determining where you're going to place the mic. If you're going to have a mic inside the drum to capture the foot beater against the head of the bass drum, and you're going to have another mic, maybe a 112, a D112 or whatever, maybe a 47 FET that's going to capture the low end of the kick. You're listening to all that, and then you're determining, okay, all right, I hear that. All right, that's going to sound good. Let me run that through a few 73s. Now I can set the low end on the EQ. Yeah, drum heads. He said Remo drum heads. I like Remo, yeah. And the same thing where I'm going to place, the SM57s top and bottom, or I'm going to use 421s on toms or whatever. Maybe a pair of maybe a pair of Rode NT1s for overheads or whatever to capture the drums. How well those drums sound, and for example, DWs as an example tend to have this really nice full resonant sound. This is why DWs are really, really popular drums. Some people like Yamaha, especially the customs or whatever. Some people like Tamas or Pearls, but DW is an extremely popular drum set. Even the Ludwigs, depending on what Ludwig you get. And it also depends on the size of the drum, right? Versus a 20-inch kick versus a 22-inch. All that matters, but S determines how it's going to come out. Versus if you're going to DI versus mic a bass cabinet. Like me, I prefer to DI, which means direct input, a bass cabinet. Because sometimes what you're listening from the drum amp head may not actually resonate to what you listen to the bass, the speaker cabinet. Same thing when it comes to choosing a mic, whether you're going to use a condenser mic to record a guitar cabinet versus using a ribbon mic or a dynamic mic. Some people prefer, they may use like an SM58 and combine that with a 47 on a guitar cabinet. And they're finding the sweet spot of the guitar cabinet. Same thing with how you're going to layer, how you're going to stereo effect a piano. How you're going to set the mics on a piano to capture it. But it's all choice. And I think the more and more you get used to recording, the more it's kind of like you can have a certain microphone and say, you know what? I've never liked the sound of that mic. It just doesn't capture vocals well or guitars or whatever. Sometimes but it does well on this. I don't like the mic. I don't like the way that vocals sound on that microphone, but it sounds good on guitars. I don't like that preamp. Like for example, my Tone Beast is basically it's like I consider the Warm Audio Tone Beast like an API preamp on steroids, because that's that preamp is hot, but sometimes you want it to be that warm. You ain't got to push it as hard, whether you're going to use the nickel or the iron transformers. It's kind of like you get used to the way stuff sounds, and that's how you make your choices. It's kind of like, okay, I'm going to use that Tone Beast and I'm going to run that through the Lin 76 compressor for my vocal chain, right? And those are the choices being made, and even in the big studios, they're saying, okay, I'm going to run, because a lot of people think the console is just your signal control, central station signal controller, right? But the choices you're making for the microphones and the preamps is what's going to matter capturing the recording, including mics in the room, the how the room sounds. But now I'm gonna say big old but. I'm gonna say a Kim Kardashian, Nicki Minaj but, right? This is only important in recording bands. It is nowhere near significant if you're going to record like sounds from keyboards, drum kits from keyboards, or you're going to use VST instruments that are already in your DAW or already in your computer, and you're just going to pull sounds, or like I'm going to use the MPC Renaissance and I'm just going to use sounds, sample sounds for the and drum pads for that, and I'm just going to make some beats, and I'm going to use samples and sounds and keyboard sounds already in my DAW. Then all that doesn't matter. Only thing that matters is giving yourself headroom so you're not in distort. You don't distort. You don't over record your levels. You don't make your levels too hot that you got no headroom for mixing. But if you're recording a band or whatever, that's crucial if you want it to sound good. One last thing I want to say is, because there is always the talk about analog versus digital right now. I've said this time and time again. Digital don't make any sound. Your stuff is only as good as the converter. If you got a really good sounding 80 to DA converter, because most of us are already working somewhat in the box. If you're working in a DAW if you're working in any DAW, you need an ADD converter. So you're pretty much hybrid, period. So that because digital don't make any sound. People argue that, analog versus digital, but what you're listening to is analog versus how well the ADD converter can sound close to analog. That's really the true argument. If your ADD converter, and that's all based on the sample rate, how good the converter chipset is. There's other factors with that converter. This is the reason why they recommend having better ADD converters to make it sound as close to analog as possible. But digital itself is just ones and zeros, just binary. I got another. Oh yeah, let's see. A Zone Recording just said finally got a mic stand for drum overheads that made all the difference. Can get all my mics in the perfect position, make a huge. Yeah, if you look at it, and I'm just guilty because you know what it is when it comes to buying gear. You will buy expensive this, expensive that, but then cheap this and that, and high quality mic stands. Because if you think about it, you want a high quality mic stand because you don't need it falling out or falling over. And that's why if you go if you go to like East West or United or Ocean Way or Westlake or any top-notch studio, they have the highest quality, even mic stands. They have the highest quality cables. They run the highest quality wiring and stuff like that because it matters. It matters. Because you don't want your mics moving. Once you set your overhead position, let's say they're 18 inches and they're facing this way over the kit, you don't need those mics, the vibration of those mics from cheap mic stands moving. The angle of your mic change is gonna change the sound of the drums. So that's right. Let me see. Chris says, yeah, I just got the Dangerous Source. I love the converter sounds. Yeah, Dangerous is good. Dangerous has always been a really good company. They've always made really high and nice sounding products. A lot of people like Dangerous, especially for a 2-channel master. And that's what they like to print through is Dangerous. So and then Boris says that's my thought converter. S period. It's like I said, that's one of the key components to your recording studio is your converter. You should have converters today, or even the Focusrite 2i2. Like I said, you got Gen 3 or whatever. The converters on that are a ton better than, like, for example, my M Audio Omni Studio, which is in my rack. It still works, but it came out in 2000. It is not going to be like my Antelope Orion. It just not. It's just got way better conversion and IO in my Antelope. Let me see. Born said, and the digital sound is what may be thin, generally speaking. Like I said, it's really you got to look at a lot of factors. when it comes to digital and what's being converted. You got, first of all, your sample rate. You got to look at, how can I describe on sampling rate? The best way I can describe it, and I can't use this camera because it actually has a small, in this camera, it's got a small, what's the word I'm looking for? The actual lens, or not the lens, I'm drawing a blank on it. Same thing with your phone, your camera in your Android or iPhone. Like, this is an Android, but the camera in your iPhone or your Android. The versus I got a Canon, I got some Nikons, and when you take the lens off and you look at the size of like a full frame versus a crop, the sensor. That's the word I was looking for, the sensor. The sensor in your iPhone and your Android is about that big. It's probably no bigger than the size of like my pinky nail here. That's the size of your sensor. It's trying to capture all this picture detail. And then on top of that, you're trying to go through this lens that aren't very big. This is the reason why when you look at, when I got my cameras and I got these full-fledged lenses, like my 70 to 200 lens captured on a full frame, when I A/B a picture taken with my phone compared to when I take it through my Nikon or my Canon, the details is night and day, especially when you zoom in. And it's because the sensors in phones and all that are way too small. They don't capture enough light, enough detail. Well, it's the same thing when it comes to your AD-to-DA converter. The better the chipset and the better the conversion and the sampling rate, the more details is capturing the sound to convert it. The more information and the more processing power to capture all that details is what makes the sound more realistic, more fuller. That makes sense. So it's like the same thing. If you take a cheap from your screen of watching your computer, and you're only watching, if you switch your computer and go from, instead of 1980 by 1070, whatever the numbers is, switch it to 640 by 480 as an example, it's going to look a lot more grainier, the details and all that's going to look a lot thinner. It's not going to be as clear as detail. This is the reason why the megapixel count and all this is like the dots and details in the screen. The same thing with your picture. It's the same thing that's going on with your converter. A better converter has a lot more processing to capture details in what you're going to capture. Because what you're doing with your ADD converter, all you're doing is, it's like when a video compared to a picture. When you're doing a video, you're capturing 30 pictures every second, as an example. 30 frames a second, 30 pictures a second. That's why it's motion picture. Well, you're doing the same thing. You're sampling thousands bits of sound a second. So that's the details. But when you have a high quality AD-to-DA converter, it'll sound a lot fuller, especially if the source that you're recording is a nice full sound. It's like using once again, when I went back to like someone using a $200 trumpet versus a $3,000 Bach Stradivari trumpet. That's a better quality sounding trumpet. Well, if you have a $3,000 Bach Stradivari trumpet and you're recording it, the AD-to-DA converter is going to capture the details of that higher quality trumpet over a cheap $50 interface. The chipset isn't there. The sampling rate isn't there. The processing isn't there to capture. So a cheap interface, you play a $50 trumpet and a $3,000 trumpet, they're both just going to sound like trumpets. But if you have a high quality trumpet with a high quality interface, you're going to hear the difference. You're like, oh, I can definitely hear the difference in that $3,000 trumpet through that higher quality converter. This is the reason why, once again, you go to like your top-notch studios. This is the reason why they have a Burrow mothership that's a $20,000 audio interface. It's the capturing the details. That's what you're trying to do. It's the reason why a high quality preamp over $100 preamp. It's not that the $100 preamp can't sound good, but you're going to hear the difference in, like, if I went through my Universal Audio 610 preamp, that's a $2,000 preamp. I hear the difference than when I would listen to my little cheap Behringer 1950. It's called the T1953. It's a cheap preamp. I can hear the difference when I reuse it. It's usable, but you definitely won't hear that. That's the key to digital. And so these digital companies, like I think with Personas, they were using the I forget the something Premax or PMax, or I forget the name of it. It's the same thing when you know, with the Apollos, and they're using the preamps in those. They were using better preamps in the Apollos. They were using better preamps, and this is the reason why Behringer decided to buy Midas, because they knew Behringer just couldn't make good preamps. So they bought Midas and start putting Midas preamps in their Behringer gear because they knew Midas had better preamps. So Behringer's stuff started sounding better because they're using the same thing with a lot of these preamps. Like I got the Mark of the Unicorn, the Motus. I got a couple of Motus here. I got some Motus downstairs with better preamps. All that's going to matter in your recording, because preamps really matter the most in the recording. So this is the details that's what you're trying to capture. So I know that was kind of a long answer with the digital. Digital will sound a lot better if the sources and equipment is better. That's the reason why I think someone mentioned earlier about the Yamaha 01R. I got an 01R here, and I said, because it came out in 2000, the technology at that time just wasn't there for quality digital sound. Same thing with ADD converters in the 2000s. They just wasn't there. They've improved within the last 15 years. Digital has improved miles ahead of the quality in the sound. That's why I say, if you buy a digital mixer like a Midas M32 today, a modern one today, it's going to blow the sound quality off that Yamaha 01R that I got over there. It's just, it doesn't sound that good. So I just use it as a reference for my keyboards. I would never use that to try to capture high quality. It's kind of like when you go to a Beyonce concert where they're using a $100,000 digital console by Digico as an example, or $100,000 Allen Heath D Live digital console. I mean, everything is top notch in those digital consoles. That's kind of like a drawn answer to the digital sound. Okay, Bowen said this is why I asked him thin sound when he was talking about, as in what is the source? Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, Dawn said, yes, you're correct. Focusrite use Redline preamps and converters in the Gen 4 interfaces. Yeah, it's kind of like, if you think about it, with the Redline, with Focusrite, some of the earlier Focusrites, even they didn't have the converter. Because if you think about it, it's like, I go back to the digital camera as an example with the sensor. Now, when you take a picture with a digital camera, I don't know if anyone is familiar using like a Canon 1DX, or if you're used to using a Nikon like a D4 or Nikon D850, or if you're used to using DSLRs, or even if you're using mirrorless cameras or whatever, or you're used to with the lenses and all that, and you look at your photos, you'll see why. This is the reason why professional photographers choose to use those cameras over an iPhone or an Android. Even though you can take pictures, you can, whatever, you can do video, take pictures. But if you ever look at video in your iPhone or your Android, when you blow it up and see the details, it isn't there because the lens is too small. The sensors is too small. This is the reason why they use red digital film cameras, professional digital cinema cameras. This is why they use the Arri Alexa. The Panavision, they use the Panasonic professional digital cinema cameras when you're looking at all those high quality movies and films. This is the reason why they use $100,000 digital cameras with high end lenses, because that matters. You're not going to get that with your phone. So it's the same thing that we're going back to with, like I said, with the Focusrite and all that. They've improved the AD converters in those Focusrites, the chipset, the processing, especially in those Focusrite, those high-end, the Redline series. Those are Focusrite. You'll see those are the $3,000 to $4,000 preamps, not like like a 2i2 for $350. So as an example, it's like me when I noticed the difference when I started using my Antelope Orion. When I bought that ADD converter, that's a $3,200 interface. But yeah, you hear the difference when I'm using it. It's not that, for example, it's not like you can't get away with having a, let's say you use an M Audio $250, or even if you got the Universal Audio Volt. It's not that those preamp of those ADD converters sound bad. They don't. They sound good, but the best way I can describe it is kind of like someone, if they're driving a Nissan. No, I'm sorry. Let's say it's the Infiniti G37, right? Or let's say it's the Nissan 370, right? Basically the same car. It's going to feel peppy. It's going to feel quick. It's like, man, this car is quick. Man, this car is peppy. Man, this car is, and it's going to say, man, it's going to make you feel like you can hang with a Dodge Hellcat, because the car feels like it can hang with a Hellcat until you race a Hellcat. And then you're like, wait a minute, the Hellcat is gone. Or you race you pull up in that 370Z, you pull up next to a Corvette Z06, C7 Z06, making 650 horsepower, and that Corvette just blows the water off you. Then you're like, oh, my car is not as fast as I thought it is. That's probably my comparison to DAD converters. Yeah, the 350, the 370Z is quick. It works. It's fast. Till you get something a little bit more higher end, then you'll see the difference. So, Manny says can't hang with a Z06. Let me tell you, that you talking about the C7 Z06. You're talking about a car that can go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds flat. We're in motorcycle territory. We're talking Yamaha R1 territory. It's like with the C8 Corvette, 0 to 60 in like 2.8 seconds. That's motorcycle quick. Versus the 370Z goes from 0 to 60 in, what is it, like 5.5? Everyone knows if a tenth of a second is a car length. So you do the math on that. So, it says I was lagging by a few minutes in the convo. No, it's no biggie. Yeah, sometimes it's the internet and connections and all that. But I'm wrapping it up anyway. It's been over 2 hours. I just want to talk. I wanted to talk about keyboards and music production and stuff like that. And the whole initial thing reason why I was talking about the music production and the keyboards is I think that even though these keyboard manufacturers are making these keyboards do incredible things, even with the sequence and all that, but I haven't seen any the Montage, the Korgs, or the Rolands, or whatever. Their sequencers still can't hang, but what any DAW can do, as far as full-fledged music production. If you want to get the best out of doing recording, you still have to use a DAW. Or yeah, I think the sequencers and all that are good enough to lay down some ideas. But if you really want your music production to shine, you got to go to the DAW to do that. So that's what I was want to talk about. Oh yeah, the sequence. Yeah, speaking of Angie B. Yeah, if y'all ever heard of Angie B. Angie B she was the female lead. There was a group called Vertical Hold, and she was singing in she was one of the singers of Vertical Hold, and they made that song "Seems You Much Too Busy for Me" and I can't handle it. Well, she was in a terrible car accident yesterday. So I'm gonna do a quick moment of silence for her. Y'all know she was the mother of D'Angelo's child. Her and D'Angelo, they had kids together because D'Angelo used to date Angie B. So let's do a moment of silence for Angie B. Also, another moment of silence. We just lost Chris Isley from the Isley brothers. So yeah, all we can do is pray for the family. Chris, the Isley brothers. We just lost some greats. I mean, Frankie Beverly passed away. But of course, we lost quite a few people. James Earl Jones. We lost what's his name from Good Times, the father of Good Times. I'm drawing a blank right quick. We lost quite a few. Just Roberta Flack. Someone just put Roberta Flack. Angie Stone was behind the end of because they dated. Roberta Flack, John Amos, that's his name, John Amos. We just lost John Amos. And then, that unfortunate, suspicious death with Gene Hackman. Of course, he was 95. He was up in age. But yeah, we lost some, I was looking at a lot of, the time, we lost a lot of people. I was sitting there, I couldn't believe when they was doing a special on Luther Vandross. Yeah, Jerry Butler is another one. Can you believe it's been 20 years since Luther Vandross? And then of course, can you believe it's been 9 years coming up for next for Prince? Next month, be 9 years. Prince has been dead. And then of course, Michael Jackson. Can you believe it's been 16 years? This June will be 16 years for Michael Jackson. Then we just lost Tito. It's a lot. It's a lot. I was thinking about a lot of musicians, celebrities, but I hate to sound like the Grim Reaper, make it sound out, but we're all, no one is promised tomorrow. It's going to happen. I hate to say it, but it's going to happen. So yeah, Maurice White of EW, Earth, Wind and Fire. We lost him. I think it's been, when did Maurice White die? It's been 20 years? Because time flies. You think about it. from Curtis Mayfield. Um, you think about. I was just thinking about the tragic death of Donny Hathaway. I was 9 years old when he died. That was 1979. You know, for Donny Hathaway, just especially when you go back and listen to, because you think about Roberta Flack passing, and it brought me back to Donny Hathaway with Roberta Flack and um and um and Donny Hathaway, with "Where is the love? Where is the love? Where is the love?" And then, of course, this Christmas, to me, this Christmas is my Christmas anthem. That is my all-time favorite Christmas song. Out of every Christmas song ever sung, nothing beats "This Christmas" by Donna Hathaway to me. But yeah, we lost Bernie from Funkadelic. Everyone knows I did a thing where a book demo with my cousin. She sung backgrounds in Funkadelic. So she knew Bernie well. She knew all the Parliament Funkadelic because she was a background singer. But yeah, it's just, you think about it. All the members, think about these members that we lost that were in these bands that we loved. The brother for Charlie Wilson died from the Gap Band. It's kind of like we lost even the Whispers. The Whispers down to just three. We lost a couple of singers from the Whispers. I don't think there's hardly any original Whisper singers anymore from the Whispers. A lot of of course, Roger Troutman, was tragically killed by his brother, and that happened in '99. I can't believe it's been 26 years for that. Wow. So and then of course, it's so sad. Just every time I watch videos when Whitney Houston comes up and she's singing, because we know Whitney Houston was only 48 years old. She was young. So Bones just said, "Wu is my mentor. I seen his kit, and then yep. Roger. Was another favorite. Roger. Is my hometown. Different. Dayton, Ohio. It's a lot. The lead singer from. Of course, we lost Sugarfoot years ago. Some stuff, something, with the drugs and all that. Some stuff is just preventable. But yeah, we just, man, it's quite a few. And I was just like that. I finally saw the video of the accident that killed, Left Eye. And I'm like, wow, they finally, they showed the video seconds before, they had her tragic accident. Then I was watching that, the Rock the Boat with Leah, Leah. So yeah. But yeah, it's been 2 hours and 18 minutes and 30 seconds. And like I said, I wanted to talk about just keyboard because I'm a keyboard player. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and DAWs a little bit. So it's going on 9:30. It's time to wrap it up. So I'll probably go a few more minutes if anybody got any thing else that they want to throw up, a few more minutes before I cut it off. Thanks, Don Gordy. I appreciate it. And then Black Wall Street. Yeah, because they were from in Oklahoma. They were from Oklahoma City. So Born says, let's talk theory. Yeah, I definitely want to talk theory. Get into music, definitely theory. A lot of people are probably interested in theory. You know, we're going to talk. I'm going to talk about chord inversions, 9ths, 11ths, 13th chords, progressions, um, and and of course, you know, definitely want to use modes and stuff like that, and how to. But music theory is because I think it's definitely needed for people that don't not they don't understand music and the concept of music theory. That's a good thing to talk about. I'm probably gonna have to do an OBS studio so I can pull up and go that route. So, yep, that's a good topic to talk about theory. CC Funk, thanks for tuning in as well. Oh, okay, yeah, Bonjour, yeah, my people from Oklahoma too. Yeah, yeah. What's funny is when I was in the army, I was down at Lawton, Oklahoma for a year in the Fort Sill area. Um, when I was down at Fort Sill for a minute in Lawton, Oklahoma. I usually call it Lawston, Oklahoma. um, so what else? That's going to be it. I want to thank everyone that always tunes in. Maine always tunes in. Born Shamir, thanks for tuning in. There's a few people I didn't see tonight, but it's all good. EA, thanks for tuning in. Zone Recording Studios. Who else? Andre, Chris. Who was that am I missing? Vigilante tuned in. DL. I'm trying to think who else. Matty Two Hats. Joseph, and there's some people that didn't tune in that I normally see. They didn't tune in today, but you know how that goes. Sometimes we have things going on. Vanguard, the Black Light. Thanks for tuning in. And then of course Don Gordy for tuning in. Well, hey Banks, I know you see you're late, but you're here. But I'm about to cut it. Yep, cutting it short. Yep, because we've already been on here for over almost 2.5 hours. So you might have to catch me the next time. So like probably had, when they post the video, probably go back and watch the video. Someone posted something that I didn't get a chance to talk about, something about record contracts and how do artists get out of record contracts. And I was gonna say they have to sue. A lot of times they have to sue the record label, get a lawyer and sue to get out of their contract. Because so they were trying to make some of them record contracts ironclad. Yeah, you're not getting out of your record contract. Like, oh yeah, I am. Especially the record label ain't doing right by the artist. That's another topic that I need to talk about is the record label and the record industry and record contracts and all that. That's another good topic. We'll cover that next time. Other than that, thanks for watching. Y'all have a great one. And let's just pray we get through these next few years. Other than that, y'all have a great one. We'll see you next time.